Okay, welcome to another video. So today we're going to continue with our look at the latest Manjaro Pahvo releases, this time focusing on the Plasma edition now that we've already done their GNOME version. Now before we jump straight into it and get it installed, we're going to read a little bit from the release announcement and then we'll get straight to it. So with the Plasma version, it's become more pleasurable to use through improvements to the design and greater smoothness and consistency in transparencies, blurs, icons, animations, moving things to accessible locations, offering hints and visual cues, and creating new settings to allow you to customize your work environment to make it fit perfectly for your needs. Following the true KDE spirit, the push for a more stable and attractive desktop does not mean you have to renounce control over how you want it to look or behave, and Plasma version 5.22 as always packs all of the flexibility and tools for customization you have come to expect and love, and some more to boot. Meanwhile, the push to move Plasma in its entirety to Wayland continues in full swing. By using Wayland behind the scenes, Plasma is able to include features and bug fixes not possible to implement on X11, offering you a better experience and more stability. We have also revisited a set of applications installed by default. So they've removed Conversation and replaced Cantata with Elisa, which is probably my favourite music player on KDE. Additionally, we provide the Plasma browser integration support for desktop out of the box, and now you need only one browser plugin. Kernel 5.3 is used for this release, and such as the latest drivers available to date. With 5.4 LTS kernel, minimal ISOs, we offer additional support for older hardware. So the ISO is around about 3 gig in size, but of course you can also download the minimal version, which provides just a basic desktop environment with no additional software packages pre-installed. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the live environment and get this installed. And here we are in the live environment. So I'm pretty sure most of you already know the drill by now, but we are going to be installing this natively. But for those of you who like to skip the installation parts of these videos, there'll be timestamps down below which will take you straight to the installed desktop. So first things first, we need to choose our language, which for me is of course British English, and then we can go to the next step, which is going to be your region, and it's already got the right one for me, so we can go to the next step, which is going to be your keyboard layout. And again, it's already got the correct layout. I'm just going to use the box beneath to make sure it's all working and then go to the next step. And here we go. So we're going to be doing the same kind of thing with the BTRFS file system, but we're going to do something a bit different with the swap this time around. So again, we're going to use a Kingston SSD, and we're going to go for a straight erase disk, and we're going to go for swap with Hibernate, and we're going to do it on BTRFS. So last time we tested it out with the swap file, and this time we're going to test it out with swap with Hibernate and make sure that's all working with BTRFS, and that's going to give us 3 partitions, which are our EFI, our root partition with BTRFS as the file system, and then we have our swap partition of about 15 GB, and now next. User account time, so super simple. We're going to call it Manjaro, and we're going to log in automatically and use the same password for the administrator account. So we can now press next to get to the summary to make sure we've not made any mistakes, and now we can install. And I'll pause the video here and be back once it's finished. And there we go. So our installation was complete in no time at all, and we can now reboot and check out our freshly installed Manjaro with the Plasma desktop. Okay, so here we are booting off disk for the second time. So the first time I booted off disk, I just checked to see if there's any updates to get, which there wasn't, and I'll double check to see if HDOT was installed, which it was. And then we've done a reboot, so we can quickly see how much RAM we're using on a fresh boot before we make any changes to our system. So as you can see there, we're using a little over 700 at around about 708 MB, give or take, which is a fair bit lighter than the GNOME version out of the box. And then just beneath that, we have our swap partition, which is large enough for hibernation, which we'll test out towards the end of the video. Now, before we start taking a look around, we've just jumped into the system information. And as you can see there, we are indeed using KDE Plasma version 5.22.4. And the graphics platform we are using by default is still X11. Right, so now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's have a quick run through of the default look and feel of your desktop, and then we'll start playing around with things. So it looks fairly sort of standard KDE Plasma kind of layout with your single panel positioned at the bottom of your screen. So you have your application launcher at the very left hand side with all of your categories to the left, and then some quick buttons for things like sleep, hibernate, etc. And then we have some pinned applications because it is using the icons only task manager by default, which is going to give you a bit more space on your panel to pin your favorite applications. But of course, you can always switch to the task manager or the window list. Now to the very right hand side, we have our clock and date and time, and it's going to show you the clock as well as the date and time all together. And then we have our system tray area, and if we just press this, we can then show more of the status and notification settings right here for things like KDE Connect, your night light, and as well as your clipboard. And then we have a few little things here. So we've got a volume slider, and then we have the Yaquake drop down terminal. So you can just click that, or pressing F12 will then bring down the terminal from the top hand side of your screen, which will run commands in the background. So if we typed in htop and then press F12 to then dismiss it, and then press F12 again, as you can see, that is still there running in the background right where we left it. We then have our update notifier. Now at the moment we're completely up to date, so we don't need to worry about that for now, but of course whenever a new update comes in and you apply it, it's going to take an automatic snapshot using timeshift, which we'll check out in just a moment. We then have a little news applet, so by default it's going to sort of populate it with a load of sort of Manjaro news, but you can disable that if you like. And then we have a vertical workspace switcher with 2 workspaces enabled out of the box, and then we have our show desktop button. Now for the theming, it's got a slightly dark theme for the panel itself, but then your application windows appear to still be using quite a light theme, and we'll go through the theme in just a moment. So with a right click on your panel, if we go into edit panel, one of the newer features of the most recent versions of KDE Plasma are of course the opacity for adaptive, opaque or translucent. So with adaptive enabled, what that means is whenever you've got nothing on the screen or interacting with the panel, it's going to be slightly translucent. Now if you opened up an application and then went to go and maximize it, it will then go to a solid color, and that will let you sort of focus on your task at hand without being distracted by any sort of transparency happening at the bottom of your screen. And it's something I've been very happy to see welcomed into KDE, just sort of out of the box, nice adaptive panel transparency. Now moving on to the theming, they are using Breath 2 2021 out of the box, and there is also a dark variation, so let's give that one a go and see what that looks like as well. And there we go. So I think I probably do prefer the darker variation of it, but then I always prefer darker variations of themes anyway. Okay, let's switch it back to the light theme for now and then keep moving along. Now for the icons themselves, it's also using Breath 2, so it looks quite standard, sort of breezy kind of icons with just a few little changes there, but quite a nice icon pack anyway. So jumping into the system settings for KDE Plasma, one of the newest features in the most recent versions of KDE is the quick settings page here, which gives users a quick and easy way to jump to some commonly used settings. So if we want to change from the light and dark themes, as well as the animation speed, wallpaper and some more appearance settings, we can very easily do that here. And then just beneath that we can see that the default action for a single click in your file manager of Dolphin is going to select the item as opposed to opening them. But for those of you single clickers there, it's very easy just to click that, and then you can then use that single click in your file manager. And now just beneath that we also have a section for our most used settings, so that's just going to populate with everything you change the most frequently on your machine. And I really do think the quick settings page is something small but goes a long way for users that just want to jump into it and quickly change something that's very common, like your light or dark theme, or something that you change quite often there in your most used settings. Now if we just very quickly highlight change settings, we can see all of the changes that have been made to this desktop. So we know that the appearance settings have been changed. And now for workspace behavior, there's also been some changes for the desktop effects and the virtual desktops. So they're using 2 by default in a vertical kind of layout like so. Now if we go back, we can see what else has been changed. So we've got some changes to the shortcuts. The startup and shutdown is using the Breath 2 for the SDDM login screen. And now if we go into search, there's also been some changes here as well. And of course in KRunner, which by default is going to open up in the top hand side of your screen, but if like me you like it to open in the center part, you can then very easily apply that, and now it's going to open in the central part of your screen. Now what else have they changed? So not too much really, so it's quite close to kind of a stock KDE experience. Now as far as the default applications go, we're not going to spend too much time here because not a lot has changed from their previous versions, but we will spend a bit of time on some individual applications. So in development, we have all of the Qt Assistant, Designer, Linguist and QDBus Viewer, as well as the User Feedback Console. Now in games, we only have the one entry, but it does come pre-installed with Steam, which is very nice to see, especially if you play a lot of Steam games. In graphics, we have GwenView, Ocular and Scanlight. And in Internet, Firefox is of course your default web browser, and then we have the SSH and VNC server browsers, along with all of the stuff for KDE Connect, so you can wirelessly sync your Android devices with your KDE desktop. We then have KGet, we have QBitTorrent for your torrent files, again we can see Steam, and then we have Thunderbird as the default desktop email client for the KDE version. So in multimedia, we are going to spend a little bit of time on the Lisa, as it's the new edition of this release replacing Cantata. And we also have K3B and then the V4L2 test and capture utilities. And then just beneath that, we have the best kind of universal media player around, which is of course a VLC. So let's go and open up Elisa. So as you can see in your top right, it says scanning music. So by default, Elisa is set to watch the music folder in your home directory, which means every time you add a new artist or album into your music folder in your home directory, Elisa will then start scanning for your home directory and then populating your music library with any of those new additions. And I've also already added a couple of albums so we can show you how that works in my music folder. So as far as the interface for Elisa, it's quite clean and simple to understand. So we've got a couple of different panes here in the default now playing view, and we can see the playlist to the right. And of course we can get into more settings like so, and there's also a whole lot of different color schemes you can go through to make it fit in with the desktop's look and feel a little bit better. We then have our shuffle and repeat as well as a volume slider. And now to the left here is all of the other things we can do. So we can go for recently played, frequently played, and then we can browse by album, and it's got some of the album art for some of the albums there. Or we can browse by artist or even just tracks. So that will list you all of your tracks, and then you can make your little playlist to the right, etc. And then it's also got genres there, so it'll separate things by genres as well. So if you want to listen to a particular genre of your artists that belong to that, you can then go ahead and jump straight into that genre as well. It also has a little file browser, and then it also has the radio section with a few there ready to go. So now that we've got a track playing, you can see that it's changed it ever so slightly. So at the top now, it's changed the colors, and it's also got the album art there along with the details of the artist and album that you are currently listening to. So just double clicking on a track will then chuck it over to your playlist on the right. If you hover over any of the tracks like so, you can see you get a few more options. And if we just press this little plus there, it's then going to cue the next track and add it to our playlist. Now if we minimize Elisa for the moment and then check out the widget at the bottom, you get a nice little widget here as well, again displaying the same album art and details of the artist. And we can of course use some music control straight from the widget like pause, skip and all of that good stuff. So yeah, Elisa, very cool little music player for KDE. That's pretty much everything in multimedia. Now as far as Office wise, it doesn't appear that it has any Office suite of applications included out of the box. So you might want to go ahead and install your own, perhaps LibreOffice, to use it on their KDE version. Now in settings, one of my favorite things about their KDE edition is of course the inclusion of the app image launcher, which is going to sort of automatically integrate app images into your system. So I've talked about app images a lot on this channel. So if we just quickly jump onto the Kdenlive website, because they do offer an official app image, which is very cool. If we just go ahead and click that, you can see that the default action to open with is with the app image launcher, and that will now integrate the app image within our system, so we can select it from things like our application menus, KRunner and all of that good stuff. So let's press OK to open that with app image launcher, and let's just close this. We'll minimize it for now. And here we go. So this is the first time you're going to run it. It appears you have never run app image launcher before. Please take a minute and configure your preferences. You can always change these later on using the control panel. So by default, it's going to integrate them into a folder called applications in your home directory, and it's going to create a .desktop file, usually in sort of .local/share/applications. So let's go ahead and press OK. Now we're going to use integrate and run, or we could just run once if we didn't want it to be integrated into our system. So now we press integrate and run. As you can see there, it's now gone ahead and opened up the most recent version of Kdenlive. However, we are missing some plugins, but we can sort that out if we really need to in just a moment. Anyway, so if we just press OK, it should then go ahead and launch the application window for Kdenlive. So we can see the icon here at the bottom, and now if we right click on that, we can of course pin it to our task manager, and then it will behave like any other native application. So I do very much appreciate the Manjaro do include the app image launcher out of the box. Now if we go into our application menu and now type in Kdenlive, as you can see, there is Kdenlive right in our application menu and ready to go. Now, as well as having app image sort of launcher support out of the box, they do also support the other two multi sort of application formats, which are of course Flatpak and Snap, which you can get to from the preferences of your PAMAC manager, which is where you can also enable the AUR. So very cool that they do support all of the other sort of packaging formats on Manjaro's KDE version. Now jumping over to the system category, we can of course see that we have the add or remove software, which is what we showed you when we showed you the Flatpak and Snap integration in the PAMAC manager, and that is where you're going to install most of your new applications, or of course you can use Pacman via the terminal. We then have our ZeroConf browser, and as we're using KDE, your default file manager is of course going to be Dolphin. And like we saw in the settings, by default a single click will select the item, and a double click will then activate or go into that directory, which is my preferred way of using a file manager with sort of single and double clicks. Now jumping back into system, we have hardware locality, we have htop installed out of the box, we have the info center, and then we have KDE's partition manager, which is pretty much like a KDE equivalent to something like gparted, which is where you can manage your partitions and create new ones, change file systems and all of that good stuff. And then of course console is your default terminal emulator when you're using KDE. We then have ksysguard, which is a little system monitor which shows you your process table as well as your system load and all of that good stuff. Now jumping back into system, we also have the ksystem log, kwallet manager, and then we have Manjaro hello, which is Manjaro's welcome screen, which is the first thing you're going to see on a fresh install until you remove the launch at start. Now what else do we have in system? We then have another system monitor, and then we have what I think is the star of the show of these new Manjaro releases, is the timeshift integration with the auto snapshot feature when you're using BTRFS. So like I showed you in the GNOME version, as you can see here, we have timeshift installed, and they've also packaged up their own version of the auto snapshot package for timeshift. So what that means is every time you've got an upgrade ready to go, it's going to take a snapshot of it before you've applied that upgrade. So if anything breaks during the upgrade process, you can then use timeshift to then roll back to the previous snapshot and fix anything that might need fixing, potentially hold some packages here or there, and then get back to a working system. Now something that I missed in the GNOME version that I didn't sort of really realise until Manjaro commented on the GNOME video is that they've also added the packages and sort of configuration needed to add it to your boot menu, which by default Manjaro doesn't show when you start up, so you're going to have to hit the escape key. However, fortunately for this video, I do actually have a Manjaro GNOME version up and running with some snapshots, so I can quickly show you how that works in the sort of boot menu. And here we are in the boot menu for Manjaro. Now, like I said, Manjaro by default hides this when you first start up, so you're going to need to hit the escape key for it to show, but then once you're there, you can then jump straight into the Manjaro Linux snapshots. Or if you're like me and you have more than one distribution installed on the same machine that's sharing the same boot menu, like this one right here is, so as you can see, we also have an Ubuntu install ready to go. It will then just start up automatically without the need of hitting the escape button. So while we're here, we can go all the way down to the bottom of the list, and as you can see there, we have Manjaro Linux snapshots. Now entering that, we'll then go into a new page, and then as you can see there, it's got a load of the snapshots that are running on this machine, and we can boot into any of these ones that we wish. Now if you've got the auto snapshot running, so every time you do a fresh upgrade and then it's going to take a snapshot and something breaks, you can then go into the previous snapshot, get into it and make any fixes that you may need, which is a very cool feature of BTRFS now included in the newest version of Manjaro. Now in utilities, we again have the app image launcher settings, we have Arc for the archiving, emoji selector, FileLight, HP's device manager, K is your default sort of graphical text editor for KDE, Kcalc, Kfind, Manjaro's user guide, then have the software tokens, small and spectacle for taking system snapshots, and I think that's pretty much it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is show you the other way of using timeshift now that we've checked it out in our boot menu. So if we go ahead and just quickly open up timeshift, and we're going to create a fresh snapshot on this system, and we're just going to press the create button like so, and we're going to call it start, so we know that this is the first one that we've taken before we've made any changes to our system. Now we don't actually have any Office applications installed out of the box as we've just seen, so what we're going to go ahead and do is open up the PAMAC GUI here, and we're going to use that to install a Office suite of applications, and there should be one in the sort of main page here. So if we keep scrolling down, we can see that we have the LibreOffice Still package, and then we also have the LibreOffice Math, and let's just go ahead and get the LibreOffice Still. So we're just going to go ahead and install this one. Right, so the installation for LibreOffice is now complete. So we should now be able to find that in the Office section of our application menu. And as you can see there, we have LibreOffice Writer and then all of the other applications that come with the LibreOffice suite of applications. So now that we know that's installed, let's close that off, and we'll use this as a test case to show you how it works when you just want to restore it straight from the timeshift application and not using the boot menu. So what we're going to do is press restore. Now we're just going to press next and run through this and then press close. Now that's going to give you another snapshot of the live machine that we are currently running. And now what we're going to do is reboot into the previous snapshot, and then we can see that the Office suite of applications will no longer be present. Okay, we are now back on our restored snapshot, and if we go back into our application launcher and check out Office, As you can see now, we no longer have the applications that we have just installed. Now opening up Timeshift, we can see that we do indeed still have the same snapshots of before and after we made any of those changes. And if we wanted to, we could then go back and restore it, the one that's now got LibreOffice, and then those applications will be right there where we left them. And we're now back on the snapshot where we installed the full LibreOffice suite of applications. So as you can see, Timeshift in conjunction with the BTRFS file system really does give you that additional peace of mind and should make you feel pretty safe using your system and being a bit more experimental than usual. So if you ever do get a breakage here or there, or even after an update, you can always roll back to a previous snapshot where everything is working and be up and running and ready to go. Now, although I've really been enjoying using GNOME 40 as of late, especially Manjaro's version, I still think out of the 3 main desktop distributions that Manjaro have to offer, that's not including all the community editions, but the main 3, which are XFCE, GNOME and KDE, I think KDE is probably still the best one and the one that I would probably opt for if I had the only one choice, because it's just the most customizable and easy to sort of change to the workflow and adapt it to how you want it. If you don't like the way your panel's positioned or you want a dock, you can go ahead and install a number of different docks. If you don't like the out-of-the-box theme, you can very simply go into the global theme, and there's a whole lot of additional themes that you can go ahead and choose from at just a couple of clicks. And we can go to get new global themes, and you can be up and running with a brand new theme that changes the entire look of your desktop in just a matter of minutes. So I think all that's left for us to do now is make sure that the hibernation is working, and then we'll start to wrap things up with some final thoughts. So we've opened up a few different applications, and we're now going to use these applications to test out that hibernation has worked, which is a very low powered state where your computer almost completely goes off and suspends to disk, and then when you start back up, everything should still be running on the screen. Now with KDE, they do have a GUI version built right into the application menu. So we're going to press hibernate now. And then when we come back, all of those applications need to still be there right where we left them. Okay, so we've just hit enter now to restart the machine and resume from hibernation. And as you can see, it's taken us straight to the lock screen, which is always a good sign that hibernation has worked. So we're going to type in our password. And as long as all of those applications are right where we've left them, hibernation has worked absolutely flawlessly on the latest version of Manjaro, and there you can go along with the little text we wrote in the text editor of test hibernate. And I think that is where I'm going to wrap up with my refreshed look of Manjaro's KDE edition. Now, much like I said in the GNOME video that we done not too long ago, my favourite standout new feature of these releases is of course the BTRFS support along with the auto snapshotting in Timeshift. It just really gives you that extra peace of mind that you can't get as easily on other file systems. And of course, a new version of KDE is always welcome. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And if you've really enjoyed it, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. Join the Discord. There's a link in the description. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.